This is Krista. Welcome back to Made to Be Whole. Stay tuned for a deeper dive into the world of plasmalogens. Made to Be Whole is intended for informational purposes only. It's not intended to replace the advice or care of a licensed healthcare professional. Participating in this podcast does not constitute a provider-patient relationship with Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, or any of the guests featured on Made to Be Whole. Please consult a healthcare professional for any health-related concerns that you are experiencing. We've talked briefly about plasmalogens and plasmalogen therapy and some other episodes. I say a deep dive. It may not be a super deep dive because I do not have the level of expertise for it to be as deep as I would like, but I've learned enough and seen enough benefits that I think it merits talking a little more about. The first question, obviously, is what are plasmalogens? So they're a type of phospholipid. They're really important for having healthy cell membranes. They're concentrated mostly in your cell membranes, especially in the brain and the heart. When we're thinking of the brain, think the nervous system, think the myelin sheath. So the myelin sheath is how nerves communicate with each other. So you have your nerves, and the myelin sheath is this fatty covering that helps the nerve cells conduct, talk to each other, get their job done. And that gets degraded over time and can lead to impaired nervous system function. Really, we could spend hours talking about all the different areas of the body that plasmalogens act and what they do, but we're going to talk specifically about healing your nervous system. Lower levels of plasmalogens it is well documented that they are implicated in neurodegenerative diseases. So neurodegenerative diseases are exactly that, when the nervous system degrades, and typically these happen later in life, but we're talking about things like Alzheimer's, MS, Parkinson's, ALS, and even outside of a specific disease process, plasmalogen levels being low can just affect your cognitive function, and we all want desperately to hold on to that. If you're not worried about your brain working properly, you're either very healthy or very young, because eventually it becomes something we all worry about because we see people around us struggling, or we've had family members have struggled, and it's a difficult space to live in. So plasmalogens, they cluster in the brain, the nerves, also your heart, the retina, your eye, your active muscles. They are flexible. So Dr. Goodenow, who I've mentioned before, he says, imagine a playground. And so imagine you've got the old school playground that you've got the concrete under the swings. And if the kid falls off or jumps off, there's nothing to absorb the impact. They're more likely to damage themselves. But then we've got these newer, better designed playgrounds where you've got the rubber type things that bounce back after impact. And plasmalogens versus standard phospholipids, they're much springier. They bounce back after impact. They're flexible. So if you have adequate plasmalogen levels, then your brain, your nervous system, your heart are going to all be more flexible. They also have a lot of antioxidant abilities, which is really important for detoxifying, for protecting your body from multiple insults. And they also kind of store your signal fats. So basically they work as a reservoir for the healthy types of fats that are going to contribute to that optimal neurological function that I talked about. So why do plasmalogen levels decline over time? There are a lot of different reasons. One of them is just that as we age, our internal synthesis drops. So after age 40, it slows about 1% per year. So you're making fewer and fewer and fewer things. Your body is not keeping up with demand. Also, things that are synonymous with our modern lifestyle especially, but not sleeping enough, higher toxic loads, low B vitamin status. All of those things impact the enzymes that help with plasmalogen production and function. How we cook impacts things. So that springy bond that we talked about can be impacted by high heat. So especially if you look at frying foods, frying fats, that is going to break things down. Steaming your food is a better way to cook and to preserve plasmalogen structure. And then if you are on a plant-based or vegan diet, plants supply the precursors for plasmalogens, but not the finished parts. So Dr. Goodnow gives this analogy on his website, prodrome.com. He says, relying on food alone is like repairing a skyscraper with bricks scavenged from the sidewalk. Possible, but painfully slow. So plasmalogen supplementation can be very, very effective. However, how do we go about that? As we've talked about extensively on this podcast, there is not an effective one-size-fits-all approach to health and healing because we all have different genes to begin with, different environmental stressors, different backgrounds, so many different things that impact it. And also disease can contribute to plasmalogen degradation. So there is a report called the Prodrome Scan that I've started utilizing, and I have been really kind of spellbound by the patterns that I see there and what I'm learning. Again, I'm still a newbie. I hope when I talk to you in another year about this to be much more skilled and fluent in the language of plasmalogen therapy and lab interpretation. But just early on, my son Daniel, and this is with his permission, he was one of the first ones I did this for because he falls into that category of working too hard to feel this bad. And even though we've made some significant improvements, he still struggles a lot neurologically, mentally, things that suggest could be impacted by this. And he was really kind of next level terrible when we went to this report. So they look at these biosystem sufficiencies and they're breaking down different types of phospholipids. Where he was particularly deficient in was choline phospholipids, or DHA. He had almost non-existent levels of some of them. When we went to the actual levels of choline itself, he also was low on that. Even though he's taking some choline products, he's clearly not taking enough and not absorbing it. So we're going to up that. But I find this really interesting. He has been on these oral plasmalogen precursors for less than 1 week. And in 24 hours, he told me, Mom, this is really going to make a difference. He said, it's like before the gears in my head were rusty. And when I sit down to do my schoolwork, words just flow. Is this how normal people work? Is this how their brains function? And I wanted to wait to have more data to give you, but my husband and son both encouraged me, like, no, go tell people what it's doing now, because if these are the early indicators of success, imagine what it's going to be like. And he did tell me, it's kind of funny. He said, I'm doing pretty well considering like everything I've got going on. Do you think when all of this is fixed, I'll be a genius? I said, you very well could be. So one of the big questions then is, how long do you need to be on these things? How quickly do you see results? So it is something, because you've got that impaired production with age, that it's going to be ideal to continue taking long-term, but not always at as high of a level. So Daniel, because his deficiencies were so profound, we're hitting with some pretty heavy early on doses. But as far as how long it takes to actually see the difference in the blood levels, if you're doing targeted therapy, you can see a 10 to 15% rise in 8 to 12 weeks if you're also looking at food sources that are rich with DHA and choline. Other questions. Can a vegetarian diet supplement plasmalogens? And again, for some of these things, I'm referring directly to prodrome.com, which is Dr. Goodnow's website. And he points out, again, you can get the building blocks of plasmalogen. So choline, you can get omega-3s from algae, but almost no finished plasmalogens. The body can make some of them with these ingredients if you have adequate B12 and iron. But B12 and iron supplementation can be really important too. And we know that if somebody's on a strict vegan diet, supplementing B vitamins is really, really critical. Iron levels, you would be surprised how often I see low iron levels, even in populations you wouldn't expect it in. I'm never shocked if I get a low iron level from like a menstruating female or someone who's had several children. But when you have a male who, an adult male who's never had significant blood loss, who has low iron, it catches me off guard a little. But iron is important to so many cellular functions. Having that checked and getting it to an optimal level is really, really important. Now, there are some foods that are rich in plasmalogens, like eggs, which I think are amazing. They're also rich in choline, and shellfish. They have cholesterol, but as we've talked about before, cholesterol is not a bad thing. Your body actually needs cholesterol, and if you have a balanced diet where you've got fiber and veggies and other things too, you're going to keep your heart markers in check. Things are going to be balanced out. Fish oil and algae also supply DHA, so the plasmalogen oil is a part of the puzzle. You're going to complement it. So it's not like you'll start this and cut out all of your other supplements. You're going to figure out what are you missing and how can we complement what you're doing and how can we improve your diet so that we can get things to an optimal level and maintain it. His recommendation is to do this test initially, repeat it after 4 months of therapy, and then to do it annually. I saw a video at a conference that Dr. Goodenow presented at where he had a video of his son who is on the autism spectrum, and it was a before and after video. And apologies if any of these details are fuzzy, but the essence is correct. The before video, the child was very, very dysregulated, emotionally dysregulated, one of the typical meltdowns that those of you who have kids who are on the spectrum or other forms of neurological dysregulation are all too intimately acquainted with, not communicating well. And then you've got the after video, which I think was about 18 months later, but you've got this little guy sitting there folding his arms saying, well, my dad's famous now, and it's basically because of me, because it was his son that drove him to do this research, to develop these products. So I've mentioned before, I will mention again, when you have these insults to the nervous system, if they happen when someone is young, it results in a neurodevelopmental disorder. When you have it when you're older, it's a neurodegenerative disorder, but a lot of times it's the exact same etiology. So you go at treating it the same way. And obviously, the sooner you intervene, the better. It's a lot better to figure out your nutrient status, figure out if that doesn't take you all the way, what's going on with plasmalogens and things before you have full-blown Alzheimer's. Do it when you're a little forgetful, or even better than that, before that sets in, because we're living so much longer, but we're really not living better. We're not dying of some of the same diseases that we did a couple hundred years ago. It's not because of diarrhea and malnutrition, but it's kind of a slow malnutrition. It's not because we don't have enough calories in our diet, but because as our body stores and our ability to produce things declines over time and we have an accumulation of toxins, the body just can't repair itself. So getting your other nutrients taken care of matters. We talked about B12 and choline. Those are two big things. With B12, many people need methylcobalamin. Not everybody, but if you have specific genetic variants, the methylated B vitamins are superior for you. So that would be methylfolate or folinic acid, methylcobalamin, which is a form of B12. Choline is very, very important for brain function. The sources that you can get it from dietary wise, eggs are the best, also some shellfish, but they do get pricey if you're talking about eating lots and lots of scallops and mussels, and you have people who have allergies. It's not uncommon to have a shellfish allergy. So that's an issue. Liver and kidney, those have really dense deposits of plasmalogens, but I don't like eating lots of liver and kidney, and a lot of other people don't too. So, but that is one place dietarily that you could supplement. I was thinking the other day, I'm always going through in my mind, if I were going to make the ideal aging package, as far as somebody who wanted to do healthy aging and wanted to prevent the complications of aging or reverse some of the things that happened, what things would I include? I've talked extensively about the micronutrient testing. I would totally do that. I think that the genetic testing is really, really beneficial. But as I dive into this, I would also include plasmalogen therapy. But with this testing, so that, again, we know we're targeting the right things. One size does not fit all. Everybody needs adequate plasmalogen levels, but we don't have all the same deficiencies. Or you might have, for example, I had a patient whose results I reviewed who had been taking choline supplementation, and the individual's choline levels were fine, but the choline phospholipids were not. So we didn't need to increase the amount of choline. We just needed to target the plasmalogens, those phospholipids. With my son Daniel, he was taking some choline, but it wasn't working. So we needed to up the dose, and I also changed the form. So really, again, good testing does cost money. This test currently runs for $499, which is not cheap, but I also think it's pretty phenomenal for the value that you can get from it and what you can derive from it. And guessing is expensive. Testing is expensive, but guessing is more expensive. And you can easily piss away $499 on supplements you think might help, paying me to guess what might be wrong with you, or other providers ordering things online that come to you when Facebook hears what you're worried about. Pretty quickly, you can waste that much money versus investing in a test that's actually going to give you a good picture of what's going on with your body. Everyday functions that plasmalogens do, we talked a lot about the brain, about those myelin sheaths in your nerves, but Dr. Goodnow lays out kind of a little more detail. So one of the things he mentions is membrane flexibility. So that matters because when you have good membrane flexibility, your red blood cells can move more easily into your capillaries, your neurons can fire more quickly. If you think of a lot of neurological issues, it's an issue of your nervous system not adjusting as quickly as it should. So, for example, with POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is increasingly common, and I see it a lot with people who have these vector-borne infections particularly, but you have a nervous system who does not adjust when you make position changes. When you stand up or bend down or turn your head, very quickly, your nervous system should tell your heart to adapt, and your blood pressure and pulse adjust automatically and at lightning speed so that you don't even feel the difference. When somebody has POTS or other dysautonomic presentations, they don't make that. So they just go to stand up and suddenly they're dizzy and spinning, or they're short of breath and their heart's pounding. So adequate plasmalogens help with that adaptability because the neurons are going to work better. The red blood cells are going to move more easily where they're supposed to go. Plasmalogens play a role in signal hubs. So that means that there are docking sites for these receptors that control mood. So you have serotonin receptors, you have dopamine and norepinephrine receptors. That whole process can be askew if you have inadequate plasmalogen levels. And you also have receptors that affect your muscles' ability to contract and hormonal responses. With the genetic testing that I refer to frequently, there are a lot of people, including myself, and then by virtue of that, some of my kids who have problems with their estrogen receptors. And that's why estrogen therapy has been an extra big lifesaver to me in menopause. He also says plasmalogens play a role as these antioxidant lightning rods. So their vinyl ether bond sacrifices itself to neutralize free radicals, which are these toxins, sparing DNA and proteins. So they are jumping in when there is a toxic threat to intervene so that there isn't damage done to your body's DNA and proteins. And then they also play a really important role in what's called lipid homeostasis. So homeostasis is everything being really zen, the way it's supposed to be. But that homeostasis that we all seek for is not a static activity. It means that there are a lot of things our body's automatically doing, knowing when to let things in and out, when to block things, when to hasten different processes. So that matters because you need kind of these traffic cops so that cells don't become really rigid or leaky. Everything is where it's supposed to be in the amount that it's supposed to be there. As I mentioned, the brain is where you have the highest concentration. Our nerve cells are really, really rich in plasmalogens, especially that myelin sheath, because you need, again, a healthy myelin sheath to speed electrical impulses. And not just is that a big deal for your balance, your reflex time, and your thinking, but also mood. Our mood is very much affected by our nervous system. It's not just this, I don't know, mythical chemical system that pharmacologists and drug companies have fed us over the last few years, that all mood problems are a chemical disorder. As I read recently, I think it was Mark Hyman who said the next frontier in medicine is people recognizing that depression is not a Prozac deficiency. ADD is not a Ritalin deficiency. We are not depressed or anxious or have difficulty with attention because we're missing these drugs that have been manufactured. It's because there are processes in our body that are not working the way that they should. But moving on, your heart is also a really big deal. You need your brain and your heart to work really well. Your heart is moving nonstop. And again, we need those membranes of the heart muscles to be really flexible and to protect them from the oxidatory stress that is constantly being thrown at it. It affects your skin, and it also affects our immune systems. So plasmalogens help our immune cells. They're protective. They help them bounce back from inflammation, all sorts of really exciting things. I also think in the context of vector-borne infections that I talk extensively about, so you've got your Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, Anaplasma, whatever else you might be dealing with. A lot of people want to just kill the infection, kill, get rid of it. And sometimes that works, especially if you're early on enough in therapy. You've got like really targeted antimicrobials, you're supporting the immune system and inflammation, you knock it out and you move on like nothing has happened. But if you have been sick for a long time, that pesky infection has done more damage. And so part of your healing is not just, it's going to take a longer time to kill this infection. That may be true. It's going to probably be extended because of biofilm formation that we've talked about, because we know that the infections sequester in organs, but it's also repairing the damage that's been done. Go back in your mind to the analogy I gave of the house that burnt down. You can put out the fire, but you don't just move back into the house. You've got to take out damaged material, you've got to take new building materials, and you've got to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And so when you have, for example, neurological Bartonella, and you've had damage done to your nervous system, including accelerated degradation of the myelin sheaths, you can kill Bartonella, but your body on its own is not going to be able to rebuild a healthy nervous system. We have to help. And this I am seeing as a really exciting, critical role in helping to rebuild that damaged nervous system. So I will be excited to share with you as I learn more about this. Again, I am a professional novice, if that makes any sense. But I think that whenever we find truth and we find something that makes so much sense with what we know about our bodies, what we know about disease processes and what we do, we've got to dive in. And when I see someone like my son who, again, working too hard to feel this bad, and I'm going to bring him back on in one of the next few episodes to kind of talk about the long journey. But when we look at the things that have really helped Daniel, so when we first introduced antibiotic therapy, what I was shocked with was how quickly it took care of the rage that he had struggled with since he was a very, very young child, and the impulsivity. Both of those things improved dramatically. I was absolutely floored. However, there was still a lot of other stuff left. You're glad that's gone, but he still struggled. One of the things that helped him quite a bit with mood was methylene blue. When we started methylene blue, and it was at a really low dose because of how dysregulated he was, he told me within the first week, he said, I feel better and worse than I ever have. I'm more dizzy. He was having some of that die off, but I'm happier about it. Like, he felt there was a calming influence. He's had great success with adding B12 shots because genetically he does not absorb B12 well in his gut. He has a testosterone deficiency. We know that Bartonella can really damage the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary axis, and that there's a lot of hormonal dysregulation. And so he sees someone who manages his testosterone levels, and testosterone shots have also been a huge game changer for him. There are other things that we've added that he's like, oh, I feel that. That's helped a little. But still, every day was still very, very hard. And I'm super excited to see how far we're going to get with this Plasmalogen therapy. Again, we're week 1 and his schoolwork's easier. His thoughts are flowing easier. He feels like the rusty gears in his head are greased. And he has a lot of hope. And so I'm really excited to share with you his journey and what we learned from others. And I'm going to continue to dive in. I've signed up for some more courses because I certainly want to be a good student so that I can be a good helper. But don't be afraid to dig in yourself. Go ahead and look in Plasmalogens, prodrome.com. Dr. Goodenow has got some good information, but there's actually quite a bit of published research that discusses phospholipids and Plasmalogens. If you go to like NIH.gov, which is where you can find PubMed, if you're a science brain, one of the first articles that comes up is from the journal Frontiers in Physiology. Plasmalogens in chronic inflammatory diseases is what it's called. So a little fun fact that I've discerned, if you're looking for good research and good science, where you are probably not going to find it is in what I call the trade journals. So this could have me crucified by any number of professional associations, though I don't really care at this point, but like the British Medical Journal, the American Medical Association, all of these associations, these are basically trade journals that are funded by pharmacology companies and by other interests. The paywall is pretty thin. You can go look and see what's doing that. There's a lot more bias in those articles and how it's applied. But if you go to some of these other journals that are actually looking at the science and physiology of it, I feel is typically a lot less bias, and you're able to glean more information. It takes a little bit of work, and obviously not everyone has a degree in science or medicine. Understanding statistics is really helpful because statistics can lie. I mean, you can use your statistics to say almost anything you want, but just a tip, just because it's on somebody's website or it was in this journal or that journal doesn't make it truth, doesn't make it good science. But if you dig deep, especially for core principles on how the body works and how deficiencies affect people, you're going to find good help. So remember to never give up in your journey for healing and to have hope, because you were made to be whole. Have a podcast question or suggestion? Text or call us on the podcast info line at 330-439-0686. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to be notified when new episodes release. And remember, you were made to be whole.